TV, you may begin.
Good evening, and welcome to the 5th election forum for the 2021 election season. We held 3 forums last summer before the primary election, and this will be our second of 3 forums this fall prior to the general election on November 2nd. Tonight's forum features the candidates for mayor and for the Seattle School Board. My name is Neil McReynolds, who, along with Laura Weiss, co-chair of the Election Forums Committee, which organizes and conducts these forums. Co-sponsors of this series of election forums are Residents Council at Horizon House and the First Hill unit of the Seattle King County League of Women Voters. I want to thank the League for joining us again this year and to acknowledge Bernice Kastner, the leader of Seattle's First Hill unit and one of our residents. Before turning over the program to our moderator for the evening, let me offer a few words about the position of mayor and what the job entails. In the first place, the city of Seattle has a strong mayor system of governing. In this form of municipal government, the city council serves as the city's primary legislative body, and the mayor serves as the city's chief executive. Mayor has a dual role, managing the many city operations, as well as playing a key role in policymaking. As head of the executive branch of Seattle's municipal government, the mayor is charged with the appointment of 25 department heads and commission heads that work directly for the mayor and whose agencies provide basic services to the residents and businesses of the city. Those departments and commission heads run large and significant operations like the police and fire departments, transportation, Seattle City Light, Parks and Recreation, and public utilities, which provides water, sewer, drainage, and waste collection services. Mayor needs to hire well-qualified people to run the 25 city departments and commissions and to provide the oversight and monitoring that those departments are doing their job. Another important part of the mayor's responsibility is proposing and implementing a budget that this year is $6.5 billion. That's $6.5 billion for 1 year. Obviously, being a mayor is a big job. With that as background, let me introduce the moderator for the evening, Jeannette Kahlenberg. Jeannette.
Good evening and welcome, everyone. Good evening. This evening, we are indeed privileged to be able to hear from the 2 candidates for mayor of Seattle, Lorena Gonzalez and Bruce Harrell. As a reminder, later in the evening, we'll be hearing from the Seattle School Board candidates, so be sure to stay tuned. In the mayor's race, this will be the format. So to Ms. Gonzalez and Mr. Harrell, each of you will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. Then you'll have the opportunity to respond to questions submitted by Horizon House residents. You'll have 1 minute to answer each of those questions. Then at the end, you'll have 2 minutes for a closing statement. We will appreciate your honoring the signals of our timer. This will ensure that we're fair to both of you and that we cover as many questions as possible. An on-screen warning sign will alert you when you have 15 seconds remaining, and then you'll get a final sign. Finish, please. I will pose the questions to each candidate, alternating which one answers first. Now, for your opening statements. For this item only, we have sent you a question in advance, so please include your response to this question. What unique quality or skill do you possess that make you the best candidate to serve as mayor? So we'll begin right away with the opening statements. And we'll go first with Ms. Ms. Gonzalez.
Well, thank you so much, Jeannette. So for those of you who are watching, my name is Lorena Gonzalez. I am a candidate to be Seattle's next mayor, and it is a pleasure to be here with all of you once again. Thanks so much to the organizing committee at Horizon House for bringing us together for this really important conversation. I'll start off by answering the question so I can get to a little bit more of a bio introduction. I think what makes me most uniquely qualified to serve as the next mayor is is the fact that I have been doing this hard work in leading on the city's most progressive policies from the city council since I was first elected in 2015. I intend to be able to have an opportunity to build on that really strong progressive record of lifting up working families through expanding our early learning programs and our quality preschool education programs, and by also making sure that I'm building on my track record of lifting up working families by increasing and enhancing labor standards that respect the dignity and the time and the hard work that our essential workers do every single day across the city. And I think that the fact that I have exhibited leadership on things as difficult as police accountability and reform to make sure that we have the highest police accountability standards across the city show that I can bring people together on difficult issues, of which we face many, and we will have an opportunity to discuss during this forum. I have the ability to bring people together, including the city council, to work on solutions that will really best serve the people of this city. So again, for those of you who are just might be tuning in, I'm Lorena Gonzalez. I'm running to be Seattle's next mayor. And as a civil rights attorney in town, I worked for 10 years before getting to the city council, representing workers, women, the elderly in a variety of civil rights cases. And I also grew up as a migrant farm worker out in central Washington state, and look forward to being able to answer your questions this evening.
Thank you. And Mr. Harrell.
Thank you, Jeanette. So again, my name is Bruce Harrell. I'm running for mayor, and it's nice to be back with you all. And, you know, I've been in front of you many years, over a decade of introductions. And so I'll bore you again with another introduction. And by that, I will say that I think I am the most quality that I will have is truly the ability to bring all communities together. I think that many of you know I was just born not too far from the Horizon House at a hospital once called Cabrini Hospital right on Capitol Hill. And my families moved here from different parts of the world. I grew up in the Central District, went to Seattle Public Schools and the University of Washington. And I think I've had a lifetime of building communities together to people that need a voice, whether it's elderly people, kids, people of different racial demographics, people that come from different backgrounds of all sorts. That's why I had run for office in 2007, been elected 3 times, and I have, as a council member, demonstrated a history of that commitment to making sure that I just don't listen to the person that yells the loudest, but to people that can't even make it to City Hall. I think right now our city is starving for effective leadership, values-based leadership. And so my candidacy represents, I think, my strongest qualities. If you look at who's supporting me, people from all walks of life, all different faith communities, backgrounds. We need to stop pointing the fingers at one another and just take ownership of the issues and get us back on the right track in terms of effective public safety, addressing the homelessness issue, strong educational policies. And I hope to be that mayor for you and look forward to the questions this evening. I didn't use all my time, so I was finished.
Thank you.
You don't have to use up all your time, do you?
No, certainly not.
Just joking.
So we will move now to the questions that have been submitted by Horizon House residents. A short version of each question will appear on the screen, and you have 1 minute to respond. First question is about the mayor and the leadership team is responsible for managing a $6.5 billion budget and 25 city departments ranging from police, fire, and parks to water and power and transportation. What executive experience would you bring to the mayor's office that qualifies you for the job? And we'll start with Mr. Harrell.
Thank you, Jeanette. So I would say, number one, I've actually served as executive. Now, I know a lot of you are going to say he only served for 5 days, but those are 5 critical days that go in the history books. And like my opponent, I've been elected to the council and have been gone through many budget cycles, looking at all aspects of our budget, not just the general sub fund, but both utility streams as well. Prior to being elected, and I've been elected 3 times, prior to being elected, I served as the chief counsel for a telecommunications telecom company coming out of, in the 1980s and 90s, a new birth of telecom, the telecom world, when the AT&T system broke up, as you may recall. I've also served as a managing partner of a small downtown law firm that I started with several people, taking a lot of different kinds of cases. And so I think my background in community activism and politics and the business world makes me uniquely qualified to be the next mayor.
Thank you. And Ms. Gonzalez?
Well, thanks again for an opportunity to answer this question, really important one. Of course, I've been on the city council for 6 years, and in those 6 years have had an opportunity to become very familiar with the city's budget and budget process. And in the 6 years that I've been on the city council, I've had the opportunity to work directly with 4 mayors in 6 years. Count them up. That's a lot of them. So I think that is important experience that translate directly into an executive role. I also served. I was also a shareholder at my law firm, Schrader, Goldmark and Bender, before leaving that practice to serve as the general counsel for a mayoral administration here in the city of Seattle for almost a year. So I've had a lot of experience on the other side of the wall as well, and lastly, have served on countless number of boards, in large part as part of the executive committee, executive team, or the president. And I think all of that translates directly into this important job.
Thank you very much. The next question is, Horizon House and its residents have a stake in the safety and viability of downtown Seattle. What specific measures for the revitalization of downtown are most important? And we'll start with Ms. Gonzalez.
Great, thank you. So definitely invite all of you to go to my website, lorenaforseattle.com, to look at our full economic revitalization plan that will apply to every neighborhood across the city, not just downtown. I think really what I want to be focused on downtown is to make sure that we are bringing back our arts and cultural community to create healthy, positive street level uses in a downtown that is going to, unfortunately, it's going to be a while before we see our office workers come back into downtown and to sort of create that vibrancy, that organic vibrancy that we've ordinarily been able to enjoy in the downtown area. So I want to focus on, again, revitalizing our arts and cultural community to create that positive street level use, and to also, of course, make sure that we are meeting the needs of those who are experiencing mental health crises by ramping up our behavioral health system and ensuring that we have those alternatives to law enforcement to address the root causes of many of the vibrancy, livability issues we're seeing in downtown.
Thank you. And Mr. Harrell?
Sure. I think the first step has to be rooted in public safety. The downtown is not safe at all. It's many of you may recall where you could walk downtown and it was lively and it felt like a great place to go. It's completely lost its character. And so the first thing we will do to make sure we have effective public safety, that we have a presence, that people are, police officers are knowing their community, and we will work with neighborhoods to make sure that people feel safe. Reestablishing community norms where a place is vibrant and a place where people can actually laugh and talk and play. And so we'll do that by using the built environment, looking at how we can loosen restrictions and work with our permitting process to make sure we can bring in, whether it's new structures, new music, just to make it more activated for people to feel safe. We will do a visioning exercise, talking to you all as neighbors and civic leaders and a whole bit to talk about what our new downtown should look like, but it's going to be rooted in it being safe. We have to build upon a safe downtown Seattle.
Thank you. The next question. The city charter makes the mayor the city's top public safety official. In recent months, as you've mentioned, crime has increased, the police budget and the size of the police force have been decreased, and there are fewer police officers on the street. What action, if any, would you take to ensure public safety throughout the city? Mr. Harrell.
Sure. So the first thing is, I don't use the term defund the police. That for me, I want great outcomes. I want to remove racial and cultural bias from our police department, but we may have to invest in a police department to create the department that we want. We will also examine closely where gun and badge does not need to go. And so I introduced a certification process by which we can look at a new kind of officer. A person that doesn't carry a gun or a badge, but is culturally competent, that will build trust with communities, and we can invest in that kind of public safety strategy as well. We'll also make sure that, as I said earlier, we will look at crime prevention through environmental design. That's sort of a fancy term to describe what can we build, what kind of lighting can we use to make the place feel safer as well outside of a gun and badge. So a multifaceted public safety approach, starting with the right investments.
Thank you. And Ms. Gonzalez?
Public safety is really about social cohesion. And in my conversations with folks in neighborhoods, particularly with Black and Brown and Indigenous folks across the city, one of the things that really sits with me is their testimony to me that the presence of armed law enforcement officer is not the thing that makes them feel safe. What makes them feel safe is good parks, good lighting, clean streets, a safe way to get home and to work every day, and a good quality public education and access to early learning for their children. These investments are what really allow us to build vibrancy and cohesion within our neighborhoods in a way that reduces our reliance on over-policing communities of color throughout the city, while also producing community safety by investing in those community safety-based programs that will do wonders and have been shown to really prevent crime in the first place.
Thank you. Our next question is, what is your plan to reduce homelessness, and how will you pay for it? Ms. Gonzalez.
Holy smokes, 90 seconds. Again, please go to my website. I have a full plan posted on my website, lorenaforseattle.com. I'm going to be focused on immediately addressing those who are unhoused and living in our public spaces, where it's in doorways, greenways, in our parks. We're going to create individual service plans for each of those individuals together with our human service providers, and begin to immediately connect those individuals to better, safer alternatives, including non-congregate shelters, hotels, and additional housing capacity that we will have through our regional approach on homelessness. We're going to do that while we work on the midterm and long-term solutions of identifying increased access to services for behavioral and mental health, and also continue to build the infrastructure of affordable housing that's necessary. My plan focuses on identifying a way to develop 37,000 new affordable housing units to meet the needs of the extremely low income, and we're going to pay for that by making sure that the largest, most profitable corporations in our city pay their fair share.
Thank you. And Mr. Harrell.
Sure. So within the first 6 months, we will build 1,000 units to make sure that we transition people into housing and out of tents where they will have warm water and heat. Then the second 6 months, we'll build another 1,000 for a total of 2,000 within the first year. We'll also take 12% of our existing budget and make sure that we spend at a minimum that amount toward the homelessness crisis. And we will take the federal funds, the ARPA funds that we will receive in the tune of $116 million next year, and we'll use the majority of that toward the issue as well. We'll also publish a plan that you will be able to see if you use a website that will show cost per person, cost per unit, and you'll be able to see our progress, such that at least if the city feels we are heading in the right direction. They do not have that confidence in us as we speak currently. And most importantly, we will provide individual case management services, realizing that the face of homelessness and the causes for it are very, very individual in nature. So we'll meet people where they are to make sure that they escape homelessness and they are sheltered.
Thank you. Our next question is, how can the city best address climate change? Oh, excuse me, Mr. Harrell.
Sure. And my opponent and I just left a climate change forum before this, so the answers are still hot. So we have some pretty good, some legislation that we've recently passed, the Green New Deal as an example, and I was active in the original climate change law that sort of set that up. So we have some great policies in place that we will sort of double down on. We'll make sure that our buildings are carbon neutral and green buildings, 100% green. We will use our transit system and double down on our transit investments, realizing that we cannot rely on fossil fuel and gasoline powered vehicles. And so when you look at our transit plan, master plan, you'll see us leading with a climate change lens. You'll also see that in our built environment, as we get off of natural gas, we will just truly embrace in everything that we do a green system, and we'll build around a renewable energy economic development platform where we harness wind and water and solar power and build jobs around a renewable energy platform.
Thank you. And Ms. Gonzalez?
Missed the mute button. There are two main causes to our increasing greenhouse gas emissions in the city of Seattle, and this is true for most cities. The first is cars, single occupancy vehicle cars, and the second is our buildings. And so we really need to reimagine growth and plan for growth that is reflective of our climate change and climate justice and environmental justice goals across the city. To me, that means dedicating ourselves as and the mayor will have an opportunity to lead on this, to build a 15-minute city that reduces our reliance on single occupancy vehicles while also increasing our density across the city in a way that is sustainable. And by that, I mean building green buildings, ones that do not promote and have infrastructure for natural gas and fossil fuels to continue to be pumped into our buildings, which again contributes overall to our greenhouse gas emissions. So again, creating a 15-minute city is a clear strategy and an important strategy to addressing climate change while also addressing our affordability needs across the city. Oh, you're on mute, Jeannette.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry. Our next question is, how will you improve and evaluate services to the mentally ill and addicted homeless population? Ms. Gonzalez.
This is a really, really important question, and the reality is that we do not have the scale of services that we need to meet the unmet needs of everyone in our community, including those that are unhoused who need access to behavioral health care. So we have an important opportunity to work with the state to lobby. As the chief lobbyist, the mayor has the power to lobby to our state legislature to increase the amount of funding available to our public health agency to make sure that we have the resources and are funding the actual programs and services and the stability of that workforce to continue to provide and to scale up the provision of those services. I just had an opportunity today to have to attend a convening of over 20, almost 30 behavioral health service providers in the region who have already identified up to 6 concrete solutions that can meet the needs of those experiencing crisis in our community. And we can do that as a region, and I'm committed to continuing to have those conversations and build towards solutions.
Thank you. And Mr. Harrell?
Yeah, I think first we have to recognize that the level of mental illness, the increase in mental illness, the increase in drug and alcohol issues, the increase in untreated trauma is a national issue that for a variety of reasons, the war on drugs, underfunding, we have to recognize how serious it is. And so we will introduce a Healthy Seattle initiative here, patterned after what was down in San Francisco as a Healthy Seattle, to make sure everyone has preventative and healthcare, their needs are met. We'll also work with school districts and universities to look at the triggers, the identifiers of people who may be predisposed for a variety of reasons to mental illness. I think the Seattle could be a leader in this regard. We have some of the best universities here. We have some of the best applied behavioral scientists here. We have to put this in the context of what's happening in this country. And I hope to lead those discussions with our universities and with our medical community to make sure people get the much needed help that they deserve.
Thank you. Our next question is, the Seattle Times has stated that the most pressing decision for Seattle's next mayor is selecting a new police chief. What is the most important quality or skill that the successful candidate for police chief should have? And we'll start with Mr. Harrell.
Sure. I think the most important quality or skill that the next candidate should have is truly knowing best practices of de-escalation and a multifaceted approach to public safety, not just a gun and a badge, but to be able to train and motivate and inspire the rank and file to be able to go to all communities and give the public trust that the public safety officers are there to protect them. This is sort of a hard thing to show up on a resume. And so what we have to do is make sure that him that or her are capable and have a proven demonstrated leadership in this regard. And I have to empower that person to shine and show their brilliance as they lead. I want people to feel as though the city's heading in the right direction with a person that knows communities and realize their oath is to lead people who are protecting our communities and not committing acts of violence.
Thank you. Ms. Gonzalez?
Really important question as well. Look, the pool for chiefs of police across the nation is pretty small. And I think for me as the next mayor of the city of Seattle, I'm going to be looking for a partner in the work to reimagine policing. And to me, that means someone who is committed, fundamentally committed, not just in word, but in track record of holding each officer to the highest accountability standards in the nation. That means there will be zero tolerance for racial bias policing. There will be zero tolerance for unnecessary use of force, and there will be zero tolerance for the unnecessary and needless killing of Black, Brown, and other members of our community. Because the buck stops with the chief in terms of discipline and reform and transformation. And so I hope that the next chief has that transformational kind of mind that pushes the envelope, challenges the status quo together with the next mayor so that we can prioritize the civil rights of people and in doing so, keep us all safe.
Thank you. Shifting to another area, should Seattle eliminate residential zoning restrictions in single-family neighborhoods, allowing for multifamily housing? We'll start with Ms. Gonzalez.
I really believe that if we want to be a city that is inclusive and racially equitable and is accepting of people of different socioeconomic backgrounds, then we need to reform our single-family zoning laws. I do believe that we need to re-legalize apartments and other multifamily housing in the 80% of area that is strictly restricted to only being able to have single family dwellings currently constructed on there. So I want to be able to, as the next mayor, work on a city plan that plans for smart growth strategy, one that recognizes our inclusive values, and also one that acknowledges that in order to address climate change, we will need to see greater density in every single neighborhood throughout the city. Because I don't want to live in a city where it's illegal to live in certain kinds of structures, because that will lead to a city that is exclusive and only for the wealthy.
Thank you. And Mr. Harrell?
Sure. I think the voice of the neighborhoods, the voice of communities need to be in this conversation as we plan our zoning issues in the city. That I think that it should not be a heavy-handed downward approach from the executive office. That we look at the needs of all communities and where we can embrace density around light rail stations, around areas that are just ripe for growth, we should explore those areas. I also think that we are not in a city where an apartment building is conducive to being on every block or in certain neighborhoods. And so that we should look at what's happening in this country. This is a nationwide discussion. And there are some cities like Minneapolis doing some pretty creative things in terms of looking at how we embrace our growth and our density, but we do it in a collaborative way. And that's the discussion I will lead as mayor, to making sure we go all around the city to make sure that the neighborhood's needs are met and that we embrace growth in a very collaborative manner.
Yeah. The next question. Should Seattle end criminal prosecution for misdemeanors, including shoplifting, property destruction, prostitution, domestic violence, and misdemeanor assault? Mr. Harrell.
Well, no, I don't think domestic violence, for example, or assaults should be decriminalized. I think that we have to recognize in the judicial system that not all crimes are committed in the same way. And by that, I mean that I think that on a case-by-case basis, we should look at who's committing the crime and why. I do not criminalize poverty as an example. And I realize many people who have drug or addiction behaviors, that they are in a health crisis. On the other hand, victims are victimized all the time. There are many serious crimes that are labeled misdemeanors that need prosecution. And so I think we have to have a balanced approach between looking at why people commit crimes and looking at the rights of the victims as well. And we'll have that balanced approach under my leadership. But I do think that laws are there for a reason, and we need to be very granular in our approach.
Thank you. And Ms. Gonzalez, the same question.
So I want to, before I answer this question, I want to root us in the why we have seen advocacy in this space to decriminalize or deprioritize prosecution in these areas, and that's because these laws have been inequitably applied in our community, meaning that if you are brown or Black or experiencing homelessness, you are disproportionately prosecuted for these kinds of crimes. That is an injustice that needs to be corrected. And so there is an opportunity for the next mayor to work together with the Seattle Municipal Court, with the next city attorney, to really lead the conversation together with city council and members of our community, including victim and survivor advocates, to address better ways to prevent these kinds of crimes, some of which are crimes of survival and others which are simply just criminalized behavior for being poor or for being a sex worker, that will be more conducive to actually preventing things like recidivism and actually allowing people to move away from the criminal justice system to build stability and to have a stronger footing in our community. That's the long-term solution that I'm really focused on.
Thank you. What specific steps will you take to address racial inequality in Seattle? Ms. Gonzalez.
My screen got all wacky for a minute. I think every policy, every operational decision needs to be evaluated through a race and social justice lens. And to me, that means really looking at how a particular policy decision may negatively impact communities of color, communities who've been historically and negatively, and in some instances still, bear the burden of being excluded from investment decisions, from investments, and also from, sound policy that is really going to build their resiliency, their self-determination. And addressing the racial wealth gap, in my mind, is one of those critically important things. So that's why I want to be able to focus part of my work as mayor, looking at how we can build wealth through increased homeownership amongst our BIPOC community, how we can create stronger pathways for entrepreneurship for our, entrepreneurs of the future, future and how we can make sure that we are connecting our young students of color to career and opportunity through increasing investments in Seattle Promise and our early learning programs.
And Mr. Harrell.
Sure. So I was the author of the Race and Social Justice Initiative, and I was the author of the bias-free policing law to make sure that we're looking at inequalities in the judicial system and in all of our policy decisions and the laws that we passed. Moving forward, we'll introduce what's called the Race and Data Initiative, where we will continue to look at the data and make sure our policies reflect the unfairness in the system. I was one of the supporters of the pre-K work when we look at brain development between 0 and 4 to make sure that all communities have a safe chance to thrive as young children or infants when they were young. You'll see my Seattle Job Center will make employment possibilities open for many people who have been deprived of opportunities in the past. The Seattle Promise is a program that spun off of something that I started to make sure that kids that want to go to school can go tuition free. We'll also allow that. And our housing policies will lead with equity to make sure that people are able to afford houses coming out of poorer neighborhoods, and we do all that's necessary to make sure that they can live in the city as well.
Thank you. The next question. What steps do you support to enable the Seattle Police Department to come into full compliance with the court-ordered consent decree? Mr. Harrell.
Sure. Well, I think that we're on the verge of that if we implement the right policies, or rather practice right policies that are in place in terms of use of force, in terms of de-escalation. We're monitoring that very closely. But I think for me, at least, the larger question is, will we change the culture? Even if we are in compliance with the consent decree and the culture does not change, I think we will fail in terms of being a world-class public safety group or police department. So under my leadership, we will talk about culture change, not so much compliance with the law as a letter of the law, because I think we'll achieve that. But if we don't change a culture, so under my leadership, I talk a lot about how do we use the rank and file, the informal leaders, the leadership up top, the chief of police, how we celebrate doing things right, and we denounce those things that we're doing wrong. So what I'm more interested in is changing the culture of the police department, but I'm confident with the lack of force, of unreasonable force, that we will achieve compliance.
Thank you. And Ms. Gonzalez?
We have some significant challenges in front of us as it relates to potentially getting back into compliance with the consent decree. I've been leading the work on City Council for the last 6 years as it relates to everything about the consent decree, and would be easily able to slide right into that work as the next mayor. Here's the reality, is that we've been under the consent decree for 10 years. And we still, in spite of all of that reform and those efforts, experienced a summer like no other last year, in which we saw the Seattle Police Department use excessive force indiscriminately in our densest neighborhood in Capitol Hill by tear gassing neighbors and protesters week after week after week after week. We received 18,000 complaints as a result of that activity in the summer. I personally received in one day 55,000 emails from concerned residents and citizens about the behavior of the SPD. We are not in compliance with the consent decree because because the city has failed to stand up to the police union and the guild. I plan to do that, and to make sure that the ordinance that I drafted is put into full compliance so that we can get out of this consent decree.
Thank you. The next question: what is the most important step you would take to help Seattle businesses recover from the pandemic? Ms. Gonzalez.
Our small businesses, our Main Street businesses, the coffee shops and the small restaurants we all love to go to, still continue to need our help. Last year, I oftentimes tell the story about how my family was not immune from the impacts of COVID and closures as a result of the pandemic. My own husband, who's a restaurant worker out here in West Seattle, spent half of the year on unemployment. So it's critically important for us to acknowledge that COVID is still real, that COVID has still created a lot of risk of economic instability for our businesses. So what I've heard from small business owners is that they need ongoing technical assistance, ongoing rental assistance for their commercial spaces. And critically important now, those that are starting to reopen and be able to see the levels of business that they saw before are experiencing labor shortage. So we need to ensure that we stabilize that workforce, particularly for the hospitality industry, which is the industry that is lagging the most in this recovery, to make sure that they can continue to recover in the coming years.
And Mr. Harrell?
Sure. Well, having owned a small business and having advised small businesses when I retired from the city council, I will say with a level of confidence that the first thing they will need is financial relief, and whether that relief comes from the federal government through the recovery funds, or whether we use our community development financial institutions or community block grant organizations to get them funding, we must do that. We must also look at the city's regulatory framework. We saw how when we loosened up restrictions and allowed them to build structures around certain areas where there was just maybe open street, that this assisted them greatly. So we need to look at how we use that as a strategic tool. We know that the small businesses want stronger public safety, that access for customers to their premise, access for their employees becomes critically important. And that's why my effective public strategy will be welcomed by small businesses. And last, my Seattle Job Center allow them to have access to employees, realizing that they still have trouble getting employees often, and employees have a hard time finding the route to the employer. So we'll make sure that is accomplished as well.
Thank you. Next, Seattle is plagued with deteriorating bridges and streets. How would you address that? Mr. Harrell?
Boy, you guys are shooting a lot of questions at us here. But number one is we have to open up the books, and we realize that we are a city filled with bridges. And again, we have to look at what SDOT did incorrectly in the West Seattle Bridge as an example. That while we look at our inspection programs and we have qualified people doing that work, we must look at whether that is a best practice in the manner by which we are doing that. So as we continue to do our inventory on bridges and continue to open up the data such that everyone can see it. Many of you know I was a technology lawyer for a number of years, and that's why I believe in using open source and opening up the books for people could see our inspection schedules. But we just have to be transparent. And then we have to look at our capital planning using our budget process to make sure that we are repairing accordingly. And I say the same thing regarding our parks and looking at how we have let our parks investments go down. So you'll see the same kind of strategy with respect to our bridges.
Thank you. Ms. Gonzalez?
Well, thanks so much for this really important question. So we already know what the backlog is of needs for our bridges. For our bridges in particular, the city auditor has issued a report indicating that we have about $100 million worth of repairs to our critical infrastructure that is represented through our bridges. So the challenge is really identifying the resources that we're going to need. There's going to be plenty of opportunity. I mean, fingers crossed around these infrastructure packages being proposed at the federal level. We as a city stand to gain if those bills pass. I'm really appreciative to Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal for fighting for more resources for us to meet our infrastructure needs. I'm proud to be endorsed and supported in this race by her in particular. And that's what we're going to need to do. We're going to need to leverage our federal relationships, our state relationships to continue to receive the critical funding that we need in order to avoid another regressive tax to address the infrastructure needs. So I'm committed to working on those partnerships and to identifying other creative ways that we can leverage REIT and bonding to be able to meet the maintenance needs that are currently exist.
Thank you. There have been proposals for making public transit free. If you agree, how would you pay for this? Ms. Gonzalez?
I do agree with making public transit free for all to be able to enjoy. Those of you who live at Horizon House, you probably remember fondly the days in which you can get on the bus in the downtown area for free and not worry about whether you had the fare or not. I think it's important for us to look to our employers and to, consider requiring that there be transportation subsidization by some of our largest employers who are creating much of the congestion and the need of the reliance for our ongoing public transit. Again, I'm a big advocate of progressive revenue. I'm going to work together with the broad coalitions necessary to make sure that we are looking at any and all progressive revenue on the table that doesn't further burden and exacerbate the regressivity of our tax code system. The last thing I want to do is pursue a sales tax or another property tax to be able to fund things that I believe our wealthiest corporations are in the best position to subsidize and help out with.
And Mr. Harrell?
Sure. So as we lead the transit master plan discussions here in the next year or two, that will be one of our fundamental challenges as to how we will support free transit. I do support free transit. We realize that something as a fee is actually one more cost that is inequitable within our city because of different income levels. You'll see my work in this regard, trying to fight, of course, against regressive taxation pretty clear. You'll see that in Olympia, that many of the leaders, for example, in the Black caucus in the legislative department in Olympia, who've endorsed my candidacy, were able to achieve some dramatic things in terms of police reform and climate change. And so I think that they will help us figure out a way to both help us with our transit needs, working with the county, and we'll look at efficiencies in our own operations, governmental operations, to achieve some parity in how we pay for the free transit, but I certainly do support it.
Thank you. City revenues have been strong lately, largely due to the ongoing construction. But when this activity slows or stops, these revenues might fall. What services would you eliminate or reduce if city revenues fall in order to ensure a balanced budget? Mr. Harrell?
Sure. So that's a tough question. I'm not sure. I mean, I just have to be brutally honest with you, as I only know how to be, that all of our services in the city sure have their charter, part of our charter responsibility. So rather than just say one line of services, I will look at, from an organizational design and improvement standpoint, where we can be more efficient in everything that we do. Because on the one hand, transportation and education and arts and culture, they're all components of a great ecosystem. So rather than lopping off a line of business that we do, we will look at how we can reorganize departments, how we can look at whether we are top heavy or not, and build efficiencies. But by and large, you're not going to see in my administration the drastic cutting of certain areas, because they are all critical services.
And Ms. Gonzalez?
I will lead in this area by ensuring that the city of Seattle isn't engaging in austerity budgeting that negatively impacts those who deeply and profoundly rely on city services for survival. Oftentimes what we see is folks cutting human services and other critical services like those, including aging services to immigrants and refugees, women, etc. And that is not the kind of cuts that I would make to a budget if we were put in a situation, once again, like we were last budget cycle while I was on the city council, to engage in those austerity tactics. Nor would I lay off city employees. I think what's important right now is to make sure that our reserves are being rebuilt and that they are stable and sustainable so that we do not have to engage in those austerity budgets. And the last thing I'll say is, when I joined Councilmember Mosqueda and others to sponsor Jumpstart Seattle payroll tax, a progressive revenue tax, that is what prevented our city from having to engage in austerity budgeting this last go around. And we need to continue to look at those kinds of tools to prevent us having to cut critical services.
Thank you. And one more question. This is the final one before you go to your closing statements. Activists and reformers talk about reimagining Seattle's law enforcement. If you support the concept of reimagining Seattle's law enforcement, what is your proposal for change? And we'll start with Ms. Gonzalez.
Yeah, I do believe that reimagining Seattle's law enforcement is critically important, and I think that I come to that position because I've been a reformer for a long time, and as a civil rights attorney, sued police agencies across the state for excessive force and biased policing, including the Seattle Police Department. So I have really come to now believe that the next mayor needs to focus on demilitarizing the police department, making sure that we have our highest accountability standards to get rid of bad cops, and to increase alternatives to law enforcement that, again, reduce our reliance on a badge and gun approach to every single nonviolent incident that occurs across the city. This is the hard work that the next mayor is going to have to do to, again, make sure that we are living up to this civil rights moment that calls upon elected leaders to challenge the status quo and to not just reform, but to reimagine how we can keep our community safe.
And Mr. Harrell?
Sure. So we will reimagine not just here in Seattle, but this is a national discussion and it's decades overdue. And when you reimagine a police department, you erase all old paradigms and you look at everywhere from recruiting, from with whom you recruit, to how they are trained, to what competencies they should have, whether they should be, maybe they can have a background in social work, a background in de-escalation. You look at the whole gamut all the way to the moment of either an arrest or a mediation. So we will check all of our assumptions all the way through. That's when I use the expression, examine everywhere a gun and badge goes. That's why I earlier said that a new kind of officer will be introduced in addition to our first responders, a person that will come from our communities. I think there's a lot of bench strength out there, people who want to serve, but they don't want to serve in the current capacity of a police officer. So we're going to tap into that. And you're going to see a whole new attitude and culture change in our department.
Thank you. Thank you. We're now going to move to the 2-minute closing statements for each of you. Summarize your thoughts and share with us what you wish for 2 minutes, 2-minute closing statement. And we'll begin with Mr. Harrell.
Sure. Well, wow, you guys asked a lot of questions here. And that means you care. That means you care. And that means a lot to me. So thank you for your patience in listening. I always tell my 3 children that sometimes speaking is easier than listening. This is the defining moment in our city in terms of this mayor's race. I think it's that important. And I've tried to run a race that is positive. I don't attack people. I don't denigrate them or their motives. Perhaps I just having a different approach. And the approach that I will use will be very collaborative. I will use data and do the research. I will look around this country to see what others are doing. And at the end of the day, we will have a vibrant city, a city where we don't make excuses, that we're value-based. I believe that we are a compassionate city, that the next mayor should be able to pull out the best in everyone. And that's why I said, when asked what special trait that I have, I hope to be that person that can bring out the best in our city. I will write my climate change plans and my educational policies and my public safety policies, but at the end of the day, I have to inspire the city to be better. And again, I'm a result of policies that went right in the city, born up on Capitol Hill and being raised right here in our own public school system. So I would ask for your vote. I'd ask for, with a spirit of humility, ask for your vote and support to help me get across the finish line, be your next mayor. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Harrell. And Ms. Gonzalez, your final thoughts.
Sure. I really appreciate an opportunity to be here with all of you once again. I'm sorry that we can't be together, but hopefully someday soon, right? I am really proud to be in a position as a former migrant farm worker, as a woman of color, as the daughter of immigrants, and as a new mom to a 1-year-old, to be in front of you today, asking for your support to be the next mayor of this beautiful city that I fell in love with at a very young age when I had the privilege and the opportunity to visit this city for the very first time. I am running for mayor to bring Seattle together, to make sure that we can together build a city that is safe, that has livable neighborhoods, where essential services are available to all of us within a 15-minute walk, bus, or bike ride, as a key strategy to reducing carbon emissions. I know that together we can also solve homelessness. We can do that by addressing the root causes of poverty and income inequality, not by criminalizing or by hiding homelessness through sweeps. My plan rapidly builds shelter and affordable housing while providing services to help the unhoused restart their lives. We're going to start that work on day one and remain laser focused on solving this huge humanitarian crisis across our city. I will also continue my lifelong work to demilitarize the police, hold bad cops accountable, and expand the Civilian Community Service Officer Program and other programs like that to improve public safety and neighborhood safety for us all. And I'm committed to being a climate justice mayor to ensure a sustainable future for us all, including my very young daughter. So I am proud to be endorsed in this race by progressive Democrats like Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, Representative Nicole Macri, Senator Rebecca Saldana, every environmental organization that's endorsed, and almost every major labor union representing tens and thousands of essential workers. I would be honored to earn your support and vote as well.
Thank you. Well, thank you both very much. We appreciate your sharing your thoughts and your plans with us this evening. This has been extremely helpful, and it'll make us more thoughtful and informed voters. So thank you for being with us, and thank you for coming.
Have a good evening, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
We're now going to move on to the second half of our program, and I'm going to call on Neil McReynolds, the co-chair of our Election Forums Committee. Neil.
Okay. Thank you, Jeannette, and thanks to our candidates for excellent discussion of the key city issues. Well, now to move to on to the second half of this evening's program and to focus on the candidates seeking a position on the Seattle School Board. Before we get into the questions, let's take a look at the role and responsibilities of a school board member. Washington State's public school districts are governed by publicly elected school boards. The Seattle School Board that we're featured tonight as an example. What do school boards do? Well, as a board, they have 6 primary responsibilities. They hire, supervise, and evaluate the superintendent. They set the vision, mission, and strategic goals for the district. They review, revise, and adopt policies. They establish and oversee the budget, serve as community representatives, and monitor the district's progress toward its goals. So overseeing the Seattle Public Schools is a big job. This year, the enrollment is nearly 54,000 students and the budget $1.1 billion. So with that as background, let me turn the program back to Jeannette and the school board candidates. Jeannette.
Thank you. We're pleased to welcome tonight 2 candidates for the Seattle School Board District 4. They are Laura Marie Rivera and Vivian Song Maritz. I want to explain to viewers that you will actually be voting for 3 school board members from 3 different districts this November. You will choose one from District 5, and we held a forum for those candidates back in July, on July 13th. So if you like to, you could access that forum on YouTube. In the case of District 7, the contestant has chosen not to campaign. And so the incumbent is actually running essentially unopposed. For District 4, you're meeting the candidates here tonight. To Ms. Rivera and Ms. Song Moritz, each of you will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. Then you will have the opportunity to respond to questions that were submitted by Horizon House residents. Then you'll have 1 minute to answer each question. And then at the end, you'll have 2 minutes for a closing statement. Again, we will appreciate your honoring the signals from our timer. We want to try to cover as many questions as we can in the time we have left. And you will see an on-screen warning sign that will alert you when you have 15 seconds remaining. And then you'll see a final sign to finish, please. We will pose the questions. I will pose the questions to each candidate, alternating which one answers first. To begin with, you may each make a 2-minute opening statement responding to the following question, which we sent you in advance. Please tell us why you are a candidate for the school board, what your goals and emphasis for this position will be, and how you plan to accomplish these goals. And we'll begin with Ms. Rivera.
Hi, so my name is Laura Marie Rivera, and I am a mother, I'm an educator, I'm a nonprofit professional, and I was once a Broadway performer as well. To tell you why I am in this race, this question comes up over and over again, and people are seeing what's happening in school boards across the country, and they're seeing how the people are reacting, how the students are reacting, what's happening with the teachers, and what's happening at the meetings, and they keep asking me, why am I doing this? And what they're seeing is the thankless aspect of the job, and what I'm seeing is the opportunity. We have 50,000 students here in Seattle Public Schools, and that means we have 50,000 futures in our hands. I want to give them the best possible future and the best possible public education. I believe that we owe this to our students and really to our community as a whole. These young minds are going to be our neighbors, our caregivers, our friends, our coworkers, and they're all part of our community, and I definitely want them to have the best. We have a lot of great programs here in Seattle Public Schools, and we have amazing things with dual language immersion, advanced math. We have some of the arts, we have some of the amazing things, and we need to make sure that we can broaden these programs and increase the accessibility, because for too long, they have only been available to certain parts of the population and certain zip codes, and we need to make sure that we are increasing access and equity throughout the district. It is important that all of our students have these advantages. And whether they are looking forward to a 4-year college degree at an Ivy League or down the road here in Seattle, we need to make sure that they will be able to succeed in that. If they are looking for a career in the arts or in sports or anything else, I want them to succeed. And I want them to have access to vocational programs so that they can also be the essential workers that we are going to need. And most of all, it's the opportunity. That's why I'm doing this. It's for the students. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Song Moritz.
Hi, good evening. Public education transformed my life, and that's why I'm seeking to be the next school board director, to open pathways of opportunity, the same ones that were open for me, but for each and every single public school student. As a child of working class immigrants, I started school as an English as a second language student. It was a public school teacher who identified my hearing disability and got me the support I needed to fulfill my potential. My family takes great pride that I'm the first woman in my family to graduate from college. And today, I'm a mom to 4 current and future students. I'm also a finance professional and have a master's in business administration from Harvard Business School. And I seek to use my professional skills to make that $1 billion budget work better and equitably and be an accountable steward of public money. I'm a PTA president and member of our Superintendent's Parent Advisor Council. And in these roles, I have worked closely with fellow parents and community stakeholders to get more school counselors, psychologists, and nurses in our school buildings to fix the transportation issues so that all students have a way to get to school, and broadly for better funding models for our schools. And I saw an opportunity to better serve our community. I seek to activate greater community support. That's why I'm thrilled to be here with you tonight. And I will continue to work to address the challenges facing our schools, which have only intensified during the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now pose as many questions from Horizon House residents as we have time, and you will have 1 minute to respond to each. The first question is, what do you consider to be your prime responsibility as a school board member? And we'll start with Ms. Song Moritz.
Yes, I think that Neil did a really nice job of outlining the responsibilities of the school board, which are to hire and evaluate and supervise our superintendent, establish and oversee the budget, serve as community representatives, review, revise, and set the policies, and set the vision and the strategic goals for the district. And I think my authority truly comes from the community, and we exist as a collective body. So I think what's really important to remember is that there are 7 school board directors, and we need to be a unified body. I think this is one of the challenges that our district has had over the last few years. So we've had 8 superintendents since the year 2000. We had a school board director who resigned from her position this past year. That was in our district. I think it's really important that we work in collaboration, we set a shared vision, and we have accountability towards our goals.
Thank you. And Ms. Rivera?
So yes, we do have very important stated goals that the school board needs to fulfill, but also, and really more importantly for our community is the role of a liaison. And we need to be listening and receiving the feedback from our community. And we also need to be able to stand up for our community and make sure that we are communicating what people want, what they need, and why it is that they're having trouble accessing programs. I know that in our family, we have learning disabilities, and I have a master's in education, and even with that, I find it difficult to navigate our system. And I want to make sure that we as a board can be helping all of our students and get them the help that they need so they can get their best chance at a brighter future.
Thank you. The next question, how do you define your authority, responsibilities, and limitations in relation to the superintendent of schools? Ms. Rivera.
Well, it's a delicate relationship. And as my opponent mentioned, we have had a lot of superintendents in the recent past. And it is a partnership. And while the board does oversee the superintendent and the hiring and the occasional firing of a superintendent, it really needs to be a partnership. In the case with our last superintendent, she was abandoned almost as immediately as she started. And perhaps that would have looked differently had they partnered better and done a better job working together to fulfill the strategic plan and everything else for the district. I know that there were some ideas that went one way and some went another, and I really think it goes back to partnership and communication. We need to be working with not only the superintendent, but we need to be working with our other levels of government, with the city council, especially with the mayor's office, and in Olympia too. We have a lot of issues coming from the state and the lack of funding, and we need to be advocating at all levels and working as a unit to make our education system better here in Seattle.
Thank you. And Ms. Song Moritz?
A candidate in District 5, I think, put it really beautifully and succinctly. She said, nose in, fingers out. And I really feel that this really captures what responsibilities the school board director has, but also the limitations. So when she's talking about nose in, that means we are actively engaging in all aspects of our school district. It requires us to engage with our families, our students, our labor partners, and make sure that these interests are being reflected and represented in the operations that our school district is making. But it is about being hands out. So I don't see the role of the school board directing to the superintendent exactly how things should happen, but I do think it's important for us to give feedback and to set clear shared goals and have a plan for how we will track our progress. I would love to have a scorecard, sit down with our superintendent, sit down with our school board. What are the immediate goals for our collective body and how will we track our progress against these goals? And I think if we have a clear vision for what needs to be done, we will be working in better collaboration.
Thank you. Next question. In hiring the new superintendent, what qualities do you consider essential for that position? And Ms. Song Moritz, we'll start with you.
I think this superintendent really needs to be a strong communicator. Our last superintendent, unfortunately, this was a lot of the feedback that she was getting, that she wasn't truly engaging in the various members of our community and listening to their concerns directly. And I think it's very important that the superintendent has a clear and consistent plan for how he or she will communicate with the community. So, for example, interim superintendent Dr. Jones has regular communication with families. We get regular emails from him. They're also in the languages that our families speak. I think that is mission critical to our district when we know that our families speak so many different languages. This is something that I personally have experience with. I had to serve as a translator for my parents in all communications related to the school. This is an issue that many of our families face. And so I think it's important that we establish clear metrics for how we plan to communicate with the community for our superintendent.
Thank you. And Ms. Rivera?
Well, as we've already discussed, the superintendent's position is a very serious position, and sometimes it can look like a thankless one as well here in our district. Here in Seattle, we've mentioned a lot of mayors that we've had recently. We've mentioned a lot of superintendents and even the turnover in the school board. And I think the idea of grace and gratitude needs to be extended to whoever we're picking and the whole process as it goes along. We definitely need a strong communicator. We have a lot of communications coming through the district, and sometimes it's a lot of noise, and sometimes the answers are buried way down in there, if they're even there at all. It can be quite a lot to navigate the district's website and the actual information that is in there. I would like to see a superintendent that is going to represent and stand up for all of our students and who is going to recognize the great programs that we have here in Seattle and the great opportunity that we have in such a city with our technology, innovation, culture, and the arts, and so that we can really bring that to all of our students. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question. How will you engage with constituents in your district to better understand the needs of schools and students? Ms. Rivera.
Well, as we're talking about, communication is very important, and a huge part of this role is listening. It is listening to our community, and whether that is a parent that is upset and has a problem and needs some assistance, whether that's a teacher who is having problems in their classroom or looking for the support that they need. We need to be able to be listening, and we need to be available to the community. I have already mentioned, as many of the directors do, monthly meetings, and also social media is a great way to get into contact with people. And now that the public at large has gotten so great at Zoom and all of the other mediums, I think that communication is growing a lot stronger and a lot more accessible, but it's still not available to everyone, and it means getting out into the community. I know some of the directors kind of stay in their own zone, but I believe that it needs to be citywide, not just the schools here in District 4, but to all the schools throughout the community, and parent nights, and the street fairs, and the farmers market, and community events, all of it. I want to be out and about, and I want to hear from our community.
Thank you. And Ms. Song Moritz.
Yes, as a school board director, I'm deeply committed to creating a calendar of community engagement. I'll set it quarterly and make sure that I'm meeting with constituents, meeting with students and families, meeting with our staff and our labor partners. And I will set this quarterly and commit to it and broadly communicate it. And I am already doing this, actually. I have outreach to all the PTAs that have their publicly available contact information. I've already spoken with 20 of them, and I've spoken with about 5 different principals and assistant principals. And I'm just right now building my roster of people who I have been in touch with so I can hear at the ground level what is actually happening in our schools. I met with former school board director Michael DeBell, and he told me that one thing that he had committed to very early on was to visit all 105 school buildings. This is exactly the kind of thing that I would love to do. He did tell me that it did take 4 years, but I'm very excited about the prospect of doing this in partnership with my fellow school board directors and making sure that we're out there in community.
Thank you. The next question. With transition back to classroom learning, how can the major problems that students and teachers face be mitigated? And we'll start with Ms. Song Moritz.
One major problem that I have been hearing from families, students, and staff is mental health. And this is actually something that I had been working on pre-pandemic. We actually do not have school counselors or even school nurses or school psychologists in all of our school buildings. The school communities that have the resources to do PTA fundraising for them have them, but some schools are just left with these gaping holes in important services. If our children are mentally suffering, they are not in a position to learn. And so I hope to use this position to engage our city leaders, our state leaders, to adequately fund these very important services in our schools. And this is the other problem that I've heard a lot of feedback is that our students have experienced tremendous amounts of learning loss, specifically with our special education students. We have access to $190 million of federal money. I will ask our district to come up with a strong plan for how we will use this money to address the mental health and the academic needs of our students.
Thank you. And Ms. Rivera?
So as someone that has been at the front of the class and spent many hours teaching and with students, I can tell you that there's of course a lot going on. And as I mentioned, those 50,000 students here in Seattle Public Schools, the beauty of it is that the teacher gets to do it one class at a time. And so within that class, they need to find the best way to get their students to success. And in my experience, the way to do that is to break things down into manageable pieces and get working on it. But as it turns out, all of those 50,000 are individual kids. They each come to us with their own strengths, their own challenges, their own interests, and their own goals. And so those teachers have a high bar of figuring out what it is that that student needs, what it is that they want, and what it is that they need. And those needs can be simple, they can be complex. And like we're talking about, these recovery services and even the special education services that students have not gotten throughout the past year. We need to work on all of that, but take the time and the empathy to recognize that each student is an individual and build from there.
Thank you. The next question. How can we get better results in addressing the racial and ethnic achievement gaps and in advancing educational equity? Ms. Rivera.
Seattle Public Schools has been doing a very good job elevating the idea of equity here in Seattle and across the country. They have been talking about it and they are making strides. If you look at our strategic plan and we look at their plan of excellence, it is front and center and it is something that they want to do. In addition to what we already have and the goals that they are working on, I would like to take a look at the areas where the students have not had access before, and I want to increase that access. We have students throughout the district that have not been able to access some of the advanced learning opportunities. We have students that have not been able to access the dual language programs. We have students that are not able to access the arts or the culinary programs and the other things. We need to take a look at that and make sure that we increase increase the spaces so that we can do that. And if we need to spread those programs throughout the district to make that access more equitable, I think we should do that as well. I want to give our students as many opportunities as possible to get their interests met so that they stay in school and that they will be successful later in life.
And Ms. Song Moritz.
Yes, I'm glad that Laura Marie brought up this strategic plan. I think the school district does have a good idea of what needs to be done. The challenge is that our budget isn't designed that way. So one of the stated goals of the strategic plan for the last 2 years is to get all students reading at grade level by the end of 3rd grade. I think this is a very important academic goal and also is typically correlated with important life outcomes such as income and just general quality of life. And unfortunately, when you look at our 250-page budget, there is no mention of it. Did we invest money in hiring tutors and reading interventionalists? Have we upgraded our libraries? Do we have a program to send books home? We didn't even have a reading curriculum until this fall. It's called The Science of Reading, and it's very successful at getting kids to read. But we need to make sure that our budget reflects our values and goals. That will be step 1. Step 2, I am eager to get more teachers of color into our schools. I myself did not have a teacher of color until I was a college sophomore. Oh, sorry. Okay, thank you.
All right, the next question in a way follows up on that. Marginalized populations report that they are not heard by school boards. How will you engage with constituents to better understand the needs of schools and students in marginalized communities? Ms. Rivera. Excuse me. Yes, Ms. Rivera.
So it's very interesting when we're talking about the marginalized communities, because when you show up to a school board meeting, back when we could actually show up in person, and you look around the room, there was definitely some representation in the room, and depending upon what the board was thinking before the meeting, oftentimes that is what they heard, regardless of what was said. And I know that there were times when even members of the marginalized or historically excluded communities tried to speak. They were often labeled, they were being tokenized, or the board accused them of being tokenized and used for other purposes. And what I really think we need to do is listen to what people are saying, and not judge by the color of their skin what we think is going to come out of their mouth or what we think that they need. We need to listen and hear what they're bringing to us, and hear what people want and how we can help serve their children and our community better.
Thank you. Ms. Song Moritz.
When I'm talking to community representatives from marginalized communities, they have identified 2 barriers to participation. And one of them, again, is languages. We really need to give opportunities to our school board directors, our building leaders, our principals, our teachers, our staff, to be able to directly communicate with these families that do not speak English at home. So as a school board director, I would really like to set a policy where we're making sure that our community engagement and communication is done in a way that is accessible to these families. The other barrier that I heard, and I realize is a very pragmatic solution, is just getting to the school board meetings. And I would be interested in coming up with creative solutions. Should we be having school board meetings at a rotating list of locations and actually be in our school buildings and directly engaging with these school communities? I think that would be a wonderful opportunity, not only for school board directors to see the schools, but also to see the communities where our students reside and make it very accessible for our families to attend our meetings.
Thank you very much. Now it's you have an opportunity for making your closing statement. And you will have 2 minutes to do this. And we will reverse the order, but I'm trying to remember what it was. I think Ms. Rivera was first. And so
I think so.
Ms. Song Moritz will be first to give her closing statement. 2 minutes.
I believe I have the lived and learned experiences that our district needs. We can simultaneously tackle equity, academic quality, and operational efficiency so that our students are thoroughly prepared, be it career, college, or community. And we start with a board and budget that reflects our values. We need to work constructively and support our superintendent. We need to be spending money in a way that has impact. Smaller classrooms, special education services, and addressing head-on the needs of those furthest from educational justice. I'm humbled to have won 60% of the votes in my district primary, and I'm really honored to have the endorsements of MLK Labor Council, which represents the labor partners that work in our district, as well as the endorsements of the 36th, 37th, 43rd, 46th District Democrats, King County Young Democrats, King County Democrats, and organizations such as the National Women's Political Caucus, One American Votes, and the Alliance for Gun Responsibility. I'm humbled to have the support of over 10 former school board directors, including Edie Mack and Sue Peters, who last represented District 4, and other city, county, and state elected leaders, including King County Council Member Jeannie Cole-Wells, State Senators Reuben Carlisle, Jamie Peterson, State Representatives Jerry Pollitt, and Cindy Rue. These endorsements matter because I'm going to be leaning into these relationships as I work with fellow school board directors, our superintendent, our 6,000 district employees, and our over 50,000 students and their families to help our district emerge from this pandemic stronger than ever. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you tonight.
Thank you. And Ms. Rivera, for your closing statement.
So yes, I am Laura Marie Rivera, and like I said, I am a mother, I am an educator, I'm a nonprofit professional, and a former Broadway performer. And I am so proud to say that in this primary, I was able to advance, spending half of what my opponent spent. And really, isn't that what the school board is left to deal with? We have $1 billion to educate our over 50,000 students, and we really have to make the most of every dollar so that we can make the most of every future. I am so pleased with the amount of people I have met on this campaign and the people that are out there doing the work and advocating for our children. And I want to thank everyone that has shown up here tonight and everyone that has helped me along in this race. It has been amazing to see the outpouring of support from the community and really all of the people that are invested in our future, not just our children, but all of our future. Our family is very happy here in the Pacific Northwest, and we love the culture, the technology, and the educational opportunities. And we need to strengthen and support these institutions. So we need to make sure that these offerings are available to all of our Seattle public students, and we need to do it in a way that honors equity and accessibility in our schools. And again, people are asking why we're doing this, and this is exactly why. It's for these opportunities. 50,000 students and 50,000 futures. I think we all want what is best for our students because we know that they're the future of our country. And if you want to provide a brighter future for our students, I think you should remember what the Seattle Times said. Rivera is the best choice, and I would greatly appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your impassioned presentations tonight. And you have all both helped us become better informed voters. So thank you very much. And now I will turn the meeting back over to Neil McReynolds for a final few words.
Jeannette, thank you for serving as moderator this evening's election forum with both the candidates, the mayor and the school board. Wonderful job. And you really kept things moving. You covered a lot of topics. I was amazed. I was keeping up track with 16 of them for the mayor's candidates and another 8 for the school board candidates. So great job. And that's one of the important parts of being a moderator. And also thanks to the candidates, those from the school board who are still with us. Thank you very much for your participation. I see Bruce Harrell is still with us. Bruce and Lorena is too. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. I have a special thanks tonight. During my, you heard some comments tonight about the questions and so forth that were asked. And during my 3 years of leading the Election Forums Committee, we received many compliments from the candidates, from the residents about the high quality of questions that we pose in each of our forums. Well, this is not the work of just one person, but a subcommittee working closely with the moderator that does a considerable amount of research over a 4-month period and meets weekly to write these relevant questions. Doris Ray has provided some strong leadership to this committee for all these years. And serving with Doris this year have been Ann Kelly, Adele Reynolds, Sam Sperry, Laura Weiss, and Jean Worthen. So well done, Doris and team. It's been a credit to Horizon House. Well, next Monday evening we'll conduct our final forum for the 2021 election. The featured races will be two of the liveliest this year: the City Council position number 9 and the City Attorney. We hope you'll join us then. Good night.
Good night.